Welcome to another Noyo Center for Marine Science Talk. Thank you to the folks that have joined us mostly, and thank you to the folks who help put these science talks together and schedule great speakers like Cliver and Richard Rios.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Trey, and it's a great pleasure to be with you. I'm talking to you from Bangor, Maine, and I work as the executive director for a New York City-based whale research, conservation, and education organization called Gotham Whale. Rich is in Plymouth right now, one of his headquarters, but he is based out of Bellingham. That's home base for him, and it, and this talk is based on his nonprofit organization, SMELTS, which stands for Sea Mammal Education Learning Technology Society. And I had the great pleasure to meet Rich right around the time when he started this organization in 2014. We were at the Society for Marine Mammalogy conference in Florida, and we went to a workshop together on disentanglement, whale disentanglement, and we hit it off and we started talking. And little did I know that 5 years later that I would be, working with him nearly every day. And so I did for 4 years. We worked very closely, and we're still collaborating, but. This talk will include some of the work that we did together, and it's been my just tremendous honor to work with Smelts, and I've learned so much from Rich. I'm a disciple. He is the person that knows more about Ropeless than anyone that I know, and is more involved in more aspects of it and thinking about it. And one of the things that he has often said to us, that those of us working with him, is, to save the whales, we have to save the fishermen. You've got to save both. But you can't leave one behind. So that's our title that we came up with, is around this idea of taking a look back at the 10 years since the organization began, because so much has happened in just 10 years. So this is a chance for us that, thank you for the opportunity to let us have this chance to kind of reflect on what's been accomplished. So yes, we got the word that you have an entangled gray whale in a gill net off the coast of Pacifica near San Francisco. And I found this picture online, which is quite dramatic. And I was looking at this and I was thinking, I've seen gray whales in Baja, California. I've led some trips there. And on one of those trips, we had a mother and calf gray whale come up under our boat, and I got to touch the mother's back. They were so friendly, so wonderful. When you see them up close, like the marbled pattern that they have, it's so reminds you of the Arctic environment. It's just it's an artwork, and they're so beautiful up close. And then, of course, I've stood on the bluffs at Point Arena with the Mercers and watched the migration of the gray whales going up and down the coast. And I've also seen gray whales up in Alaska when I worked on a survey up in the Arctic, up in the Chukchi and Bering Seas. And so I've had a chance to see the gray whales in a lot of different environments. One of the things that we've learned about whales more and more, I think, is just how many emotions and behaviors they have that are similar to ours, right? They feel a lot of the same things that we feel. They go through the same emotions that we do as mammals. And I'm not sure how this gray whale, what a lot about this gray whale's personality, but I'm sure that this gray whale right now is scared. I'm sure the whale is in pain. I'm sure the whale is probably sad. And those are emotions that we can really relate to. And no fisherman wants this to happen. No fisherman wants to lose their gear. No fisherman wants to see an animal like this in pain. Um, no conservationist wants it. So I mean that's a good place to start. Neither of the conservation or the fishermen, want this to be the outcome. I grew up in a commercial fishing family on an island off the coast of Maine, and I've worked in commercial fisheries a lot. And, a lot of the work that we've done with Ropeless is work trying to reach fishermen and work with them. And I'll have to say, I really believe, like, uh, for many of them, it's really hard work. It's physically demanding. You're on a moving platform. Sure, there are picture perfect days where you wouldn't want to be anywhere else, but there's a lot of days where it's thick fog or freezing cold or rough, big waves, and there's a lot of demands on you, and it's really exhausting. This headline I grabbed from an article I found online that this from England in one of the newspapers there, where this town is having a hard time finding young people that are willing to do the work because it's so hard. So fishing is hard. It's demanding. It involves your personal safety, your crew's safety. I mean, it's dangerous. Um, so I think we have to keep that in mind when we're talking about this issue around entanglement. I think it helps to understand their perspective. They're already under a lot of stress. They are their own business people. They have to manage a business and do all this work. And there's so many different things coming at them. So one of the things I learned in this process is um, just really like, my goodness, they have so much coming at them. So then you throw an issue like entanglement at them, and like, oh my God, well, how do I deal with that? And it's scary for them. It's scary for them to think, how will I be able to make a living if I can't use a rope and a line to fish for crab or lobster or gillnet or whatever kind of fixed gear fishery that they're doing that involves, lines that could entangle marine mammals. So the one thing that I like to think about marine fishermen, I kind of think of them as marine mammals in a way because they spend so much of their life out there. They have such a profound impact. They're really part of the ecosystem. And I think that's one way of getting back to this kind of concept that Rich has really you know, made us bring us back to a lot, which is that both fishermen and whales, we have to save both. We have to find things that work for both. So I went from a commercial fishing family to had a chance to go out whale watching when I was just 18 in college, and was totally, it was an unbelievable trip, and it changed my life and changed the direction of my life. I fell in love with whales on that trip. It was an epiphany moment. And then I worked for 30 years guiding whale watching trips around the world, but a lot from Bar Harbor on these two boats, where we could see a lot of the second largest whale in the world, the finback whale that's in this picture. So whale watching, it can be, well, for me, it was addictive. It was so exciting to take people from all over the world out to see whales and have this opportunity to share an incredible experience with them, see them doing unbelievable things, and change people's lives. And on its best days, it can be extraordinary, just so impactful, and you feel so fortunate to be connected to it. Um, However, in my 30 years of guiding, where I took over 700,000 people whale watching, we did see whales every year that were entangled, sometimes severely entangled, and in some years we saw, multiple whales entangled. So this has been an ongoing issue for a long time, but even before I was whale watching, this has been an issue. This is a whale named spinnaker, a humpback whale that we watched for quite a few years off of Bar Harbor that has a mark on its tail that looks like the sail from a sailboat. So that's where it gets this name spinnaker. And this was a wonderful whale that we watched a lot. And then one day we found Spinnaker entangled and we called the rescue team and they came the next morning and released Spinnaker. And then a couple of years later, we found Spinnaker again entangled. And this time the whale was really entangled and the crew from the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown that do the disentanglement flew up and we got them a hotel room and they went out with the Maine Marine Patrol the next day and the whale had 28 wraps. It had multiple lobster buoy lines around its tail. It took a long time. And then it also had gill net in its mouth. And it had cut up into the roof of its mouth and was actually lodged up in the mouth because maybe it had gone down and got caught and then was trying to fight to get back up. But it was actually two entanglements there. And then, about a year later, this whale got entangled a fourth time. And we just couldn't believe it, It got entangled again. And just shortly after that, I think that really did the whale in. It washed up in Acadia National Park in Bar Harbor dead. And so I think it points to like just how ubiquitous lines can be and how challenging it is for whales. In many places, there's a lot of vertical lines that are being used to fish. So of course, disentanglement, that's one way and it's an important way that we can help animals that are entangled. The person that's at the lead in this for the International Whaling Commission is a gentleman named Dave Matilla, who's here pictured, and he does trainings all over the world. He was actually one of the leaders of the workshop that Rich and I attended, and so he goes to Oman and did a training there. He did a training in Baja, Mexico, and taught them how to disentangle whales. They also went to Greenland and train them there. So literally all over the world he goes and he brings tools and trains them and all the techniques that have been developed. And David will be the first person to say, and we've heard him say it a lot, the solution to entanglement is not disentanglement. And he kind of just leaves it at that. Because we're only getting such a small percentage of the whales and many of them aren't getting attention. So there's a report that NOAA puts out annually about entanglements and tracks them. And you can see here by region this chart. And what they found is in this one like 10-year period, the average annual entanglements that they found in the US waters were around 71, some years much higher. And this is just known entanglement. And this is, of course, the US waters are just a few percentage of the world's global waters. So again, I think this helps illustrate what a profound kind of global and large issue this is. For us in New England, what really has brought this to the forefront is the right whale, the North Atlantic right whale, which numbers now around 360 and is critically endangered. And a science paper was done by Sarah Sharp and colleagues and looked at all the necropsy data, all the whales that have died and been brought ashore to determine what percentage of them died by entanglement. And of the whales that were looked at in this 16-year period, it was around 45 that they could do necropsies on. 58% were related to fishing rope entanglement, and 42% to ship strikes. With the right whale that was slowly increasing its population up until 2010 and then has been in a decline. We've lost 32% of them since 2010. Resulted in NOAA having a rulemaking process to put more rules in place to protect them. And in that draft environmental impact report that they put together before they did the rulemaking, I was struck by this. On page 10, they said that they had done a review and they had looked at all the entanglements that were serious injuries, which kind of lead to mortality or mortality. And between 2010 and 2018, they had documented 682 entanglements from Canada to Florida. 267 of those were minke whales, 264 were humpbacks, 89 right whales. And again, shows like, I think what we're trying to get at here is that this is a very profound issue, and it's not just here and there. I mean, this is a really, significant conservation concern for these whales. So if you're wondering, like, well, what percentage of the whales get entangled, that how do we know what percentage of them get entangled? Well, this study was done by Duke Robbins and others on the humpback whale scarring, and only about 10% of this was a couple of reports that she did looking at all the humpback pictures, which we have tremendous amount of humpback whale photographs and from the Gulf of Maine, and they found that about 10% annually are reported entangled that then have scars on their body. So we're only really seeing a small percentage of the whales that actually get entangled. This paper was done by Richard Pace and others that showed that only about 1/3 of the right whales do we know why they died. 2/3 of them we don't even know what they're calling cryptic mortality. 2/3 of them just are dying, but if you extrapolate the numbers for how many die through entanglement, it suggests a lot more of them are dying from entanglement that we see. Then there's this series of papers that Michael Moore and his colleagues at his lab at Woods Hole at the Marine Mammal Lab there have done, that really have zeroed in on the amount of energy that whales lose after an entanglement event, how it affects them on a reproductive level. And then also the piece here that is at the heart of, like, the amount of, for many of the whales, it's 3 to 6 months with a rope wrapped around their body, digging into them. And the amount of pain and suffering that they go through is tremendous. When they are able to find them and see what has happened, there is a humane piece to this that is really, I think, important. Michael Moore, by the way, put that all into a book that's very, I would highly recommend if you're more interested in the entanglement and whale conservation issue. And that's a book called We Are All Whalers. And that's an excellent review. So what has been the response to all this, entanglement as a way to try to mitigate it? Well, for fishermen, it has often been from both the US and Canadian governments to go to closures, vertical line closures. So in Massachusetts, you can see these areas here where they're blocked off and color-coded, where there's seasonal closures, where the fishermen aren't allowed to fish. And then in Canada, they have places that are closed off. And after 15 days, if a whale sighted in that closure again, then they just close it for the rest of the season. So this isn't great for fishermen, right? When and this is a real concern when they're losing their fishing grounds. So Dungeness crab in California, same thing, right? Fishing zones getting closed off, again, losing access to fishing grounds at key times of the year. So now this is a development that's unfolded here in the Northeast, where some of the closures have been closed, but not to fishing. they have been closed to vertical lines. No fixed vertical lines, but the fishery is allowed to remain open if you use ropeless fishing gear. Those ropeless systems that they use in the areas where they allow them, they don't allow them in Cape Cod Bay. There's too large of a concentration of right whales there, but these other areas, for example, that are circled, they must use NOAA approved systems. And the three systems that have been approved for the last 2 years are EdgeTech, Blue Ocean Gear, and the SMELTS gear for use. And so fishermen are using these systems now to fish in vertical line closed areas. And so this gets to the point where we'll go back to when Rich and I started to really work together on testing gear, and we got a grant from Pew to do that. And this is the vessel that we used to take out ropeless fishing gear and test. We did many days of testing, and we went to all different seafloor sediment types. We tried to go to mud and sand and rocky bottom and ledges and cliffs, and of course there you have big tides, 8 to 12 foot tides. But we really did try to go to the places where we thought the gear would get stuck and hung up. You know, we really tried to, you know, test it as hard as we could. And so we were using different size systems. The system that Rich has created is called the raft, and you can have a lobster raft, a crab raft, a gillnet raft, but it kind of looks like a trap, but this is not a trap. This is a ropeless gear unit, and it's based on the idea that you have scuba tanks with air inside, and it has an airbag, and a signal is sent from the boat to this on the seafloor that triggers it to release air. It fills the airbag, it comes to the surface, it's attached by a piece of line to your first fishing trap or a string of traps, could be 20 traps, and then you can pull that in. Using a modem to, and here you can see this little hockey puck-like device in the top of the picture there. That's Rich out on the boat and looking at the deck box, and that sends a signal once you put it in the water. And we tested 3 different trigger release systems with the acoustic triggers. Here's some example of us doing some of this. Boom, there's the airbag coming to the surface there, right? So there's Mount Desert Island. That's off the coast of Maine. Oh, hold on. Sorry. Hey, Rich, anything to say about that at this point? Hi, Rich. Oh, maybe he stepped away.
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
You're doing great.
Okay. Okay. So then we oh, let's see. We this is the deck box. We also tested some EdgeTech gear with Rob Morris, the lead on that, and they have developed a trap tracker, which is an app that you can put on your phone or a tablet that marks when you put the gear over. You can mark the gear where it goes in, and then you can look at it from your house and see where your gear is out on the ocean. It's with Navionics charts. It's a you know, terrific GPS location. Their system is based on stowed rope. So in this case, you put the rope into this box, and then when the acoustic signal is sent from the boat, it triggers the top door to be released. And that floats to the surface. It has floats on it. It brings the line to the surface. So it brings the line up, and then you grab that and you bring it in, and it's connected to your first trap. When we were doing this testing, a lot of it we did with lobster traps, but we weren't fishing with lobster traps. We were testing, so we vented off the traps about 40% of the tests included 3 traps, like a string of traps, just like the fishermen would fish. But none of the gear was left overnight. We just put it out, left it for a moment, and then retrieved it. Okay. One of the things we did was some gear marking where we used 2 ropeless units, a SMELTS system and an EdgeTech system. And that's Rich and Rob looking out at Egg Rock. And we used the Trap Tracker, again, the app with the chart plotter, so you could mark the gear when you put it over and you could see it on there. And so we did a number of tests there. This was this work at Egg Rock. This is again showing the ropeless gear coming to the surface. So then it's on the seafloor. It has no buoy and line. That's a buoy and line out there you can see on the water. That's a regular lobster line gear. But our system, you'll see here in a moment, will come up.
GoPro is on the bag. I think that's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, we like to put cameras on the gear, put it on the ropeless unit on the raft or on the Rich has like hundreds of hours of underwater footage to see how the gear is interacting with the ocean at the bottom. Oh. Okay, we also did some early testing of like subsea marking with the Teledyne system, where we could pinpoint where the gear was on the seafloor. Gear marking, of course, knowing exactly where your gear is on the seafloor is really important. So we were able to do some early testing with that. We did some testing where we went far away from the gear, and then we put the modem in the water and we signaled it and tried to see how far away we could range to it. And at one point, we were able to range and release the gear from 0.7 miles away. We also went way out offshore, 25 miles, and we were in 450 feet of water, and we used a big airbag. This is where we really realized that, like, to me, it was just incredible to realize like what a lifting engine this gear is. It came to the surface, bringing the whole gear unit up, but it also brought the 3 traps up in the water column and was holding those 3 traps in the water column. That's how powerful it is. So that air is going to get to the surface. And that's one of the things that makes this really good in a rocky bottom environment. This particular system is excellent in an environment that's rough and challenging and has a lot of rocky bottom, which the Gulf of Maine does. Here was out 25 miles offshore at this marine mammal research station that's very famous called Mount Desert Rock, where we were doing some testing. And again, you'll see the airbag coming up here in a moment.
There it is, coming up.
There we go. So we did, in this testing, we did 65 deployments. We had 62 successful retrievals. We had a couple of times things didn't work. That 2 of them were human failures, that we made mistakes. One of the EdgeTech system got caught up in the rocky ledge. But I thought, just for our first testing, to have such success was really great, and we learned a lot. And this was at the very beginning of this. We then went on to win a grant to do the first gillnet ropeless fishing testing in the world. And this was the title of our project. We were also using Blue Ocean Gear smart buoys to locate and track the gill nets. And our plan was to remove 1 end line of the 2 end lines that are used by gill nets. And here we worked with the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association, which has a number of gill net fishermen. And this grant was through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And we worked with fishermen in Maine, We got some fishermen in New Hampshire to at least take the gear on board. We showed them, tried to get them to use it. They wound up not being successful. But we also worked with a fisherman in Massachusetts, a gill netter, who had incredible success. So with gill nets, of course, that's a long net, in this case for monkfish, and many long, what they call strings of net that are down near the seafloor. It's often these vertical lines that are quite heavy with buoys, and they use anchors to anchor off the net and leave it overnight or leave it for a few days. It's these that are most likely, in many cases, to really be a challenge for whales or marine life of all kinds in entanglement. And so our plan was to remove one end line and replace it with a gillnet raft, and then add a blue ocean smart buoy to track the other line. So if something got entangled in that line, we could track it, because this has iridium satellite, so it could be tracked across the ocean anywhere it went. So this was also about ghost gear too, the idea that we could reduce ghost gear by tracking it this way. We had to get an exempted fishing permit because this was not in a closure or an area that's closed. And so the fishery is designed so that it's required to have two, buoys. Same with the lobster fishery, it's required to have a buoy in line. So to do anything, you need an exempted fishing permit from NOAA. And that was quite a process. It took some time, but we were successful in being able to get this permit to do this. And then over the winter, Rich and his team, Kevin, and they built systems for the gill netters. We went in the spring, did our training, worked with them, got them all set up, went out to sea and did a lot of testing with them, went out fishing with them, and had the chance to see everything in action out there. Okay, so here you can see the high flyer in this lower picture on the right with the smart buoy. The smart buoys, there's so many reasons why they're magnificent and can be of great value to the fishery and to conservation. They're an amazing company. I highly encourage you to look them up online. The fishermen loved the fact that they could see. Oh, I'm going to go back to that slide. They could see their gear out offshore. They could monitor it and see if it was moving, if a boat had caught it, if a current took it, if a whale got entangled. They could watch their gear. It also collected a lot of information too. These buoys measure the distance they move and collects the air temperature, water temperature. So here's some pictures of us working with the gillnet fishermen, and this fisherman in Massachusetts the first season he used it 48 tries, 48 retrievals with the SMELTS Teledyne gear, and 48 successes. We're just so ecstatic, and he's become a real essential person in this. Okay, so let's move on from that early work and talk about some of the things that are advancing as far as bringing the technology up to a place where it's really viable commercially for fishermen. One of the things that becomes really clear when you're doing this, the way we were doing it, is that you have to stop the boat, put the buoy and the transducer in the water. You have to lower a cable, the transducer, signal the gear. That's not going to work for the fishermen. They're moving too fast. Everything is very efficient for them. So Rich was able to install in a boat in Massachusetts and a partner fisherman the first hull-mounted transducers for two different systems. Here they are on a boat called the Resolve with our good friend Rob and Rob Martin. And this is out of Sandwich, Mass. This is the first in the world. So now the boat can be underway, signal the gear ahead of it, and you don't have to stop to put the cable in the water, right? This is now built into the hull. A critical piece to this is that there's a whole bunch of different systems that are being developed and different approaches to using ropeless. So we talked about the Edge Tech, the stowed rope, there's a spool, there's many different systems, many different companies. And so how do you get them all to be interoperable, right? To work so they're under one frequency, and they can, a fisherman doesn't need 10 different modems to communicate with different gear, different systems. If we need, it's really critical that there's one language that they communicate in, and that we figure out how to be able to effectively mark the gear on the seafloor to know exactly where it is. So when they're fishing, if they can't see a buoy in line, they can set their gear more precisely without setting it over the top of another fisherman. So these are some critical pieces to the technology. Rich, is there anything you want to say here about what's being developed with the interoperability?
Yeah, there's a real challenge here with the removing the physical buoy out of the ocean has become a very complex engineering challenge to try to produce a system that can work for the fixed gear fishers, and then really the mobile fleet that are, potentially dragging for some other ground fish or scallops or sea clams. And then we have wind farms that are starting to appear. So there's ground cable laying, and then there's other stakeholders that use the ocean. So trying to develop a buoy system that's virtual, that allows everybody else that's out there to know where the gear is. So we reduce these negative interactions and obviously reduce marine debris. But it's a very complex problem, and some really great organizations are all currently working to try to solve this. And Earth Ranger, they're at the Paul Allen Institute. They're going to help us with really being able to bring some of all of the data pieces to a way that we can all discern them or understand them in a way that makes sense to the captains at sea in real time. And that's a real important thing.
Okay, this is the new research vessel that I didn't skip a slide, did I? Let's see. Okay, this is a new research vessel that SMELTS has acquired, called the Ocean Researcher. And this is the boat that's going to put everything together so that the fishermen have a full system, so that they can really see all the pieces of this working together. Rich, do you want to talk about what your hopes are for this?
Yep. What we've discovered is that the fishers are figuring out how to recover the gear. They're actually getting relatively proficient with it. It's been a really amazing thing to see them evolve and really get good at recovering this type of gear. But again, the marking of the gear is a real challenge, and to move it forward into fisheries and to have it come under the Magnuson Fisheries Act, we have to provide a way to mark the gear correctly for all the stakeholders. So what Smelts decided to do is if we could get a vessel together and put all the technologies that all of our partners are working on in a platform that we could test and trial, and then ultimately be able to use the boat for enforcement for state officials or government officials, NOAA or National Marine Fisheries Service, to come out on the water and potentially recover some ropeless gear to look like what it would be like to enforce this gear and how to manage that. So we realized that there was a gap of education and learning that we wanted to provide. So we bucked up and we got this amazing old boat, and we've been polishing and scrubbing and fixing and putting all this technology in, and we're just about ready to launch it. We actually we finished up the engines today, and we're very excited to get it in the water because everybody, all of our partners, are very excited to finally have this platform, because we get information from the fishers, but at times it's very cryptic. um, it can take a month before we get an answer, like, did the gear work? And we don't hear from them, and they're like, well, you didn't hear from me. Yeah, it worked fine. So it will give us a platform to really push the testing, because really Smelts is trying to build this full solution for the fishery, and we need to have the shipboard technology and the seafloor technology and the interoperability of marking and interoperability of recovery, and we need all these pieces for this to move forward. And we hope that if we can get this system right, it can start moving out into regional fisheries, and ultimately to global fisheries.
So Rich and I were at the North American Seafood Expo in Boston last year, and Rich was there again this year. It is incredible. It's thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people from all over the world, and they all coming together to market seafood, and all the biggest companies in the world there, and lots of workshops, lots of presentations. And what was so impressive to see all that and realize how enormous the seafood industry is, is the real huge effort that was an emphasis. Most of the workshops and the presentations were all around issues around sustainability. So, MSC certification or certification programs to prove that this is a sustainable seafood and it's being caught in a healthy way and isn't killing lots of marine mammals. Traceability, so you could trace the fish, so you knew really where it was coming from and what you were getting. Efforts to stop illegal fishing, efforts to stop unreported catch, fishery improvement plans, which they call FIPS, decreasing bycatch everywhere in the world, and a whole lot of conservation groups there working with the seafood industry. So that I was really impressive. In fact, there was this group, Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, did a whole evening on ropeless, and they had all the ropeless manufacturers there, and had a chance to speak about each of their gear, and they filled the room with buyers and fishermen, and it was just exciting to see the opportunity that there really is, the public is getting through and saying we want this, and it's really a driving force behind what's going on with fisheries. So to kind of start to think about wrapping up here, you may say, okay, what can I do to help support this if I'm excited about supporting a move more toward ropeless or helping ropeless? Well, there's an annual Ropeless Consortium. It's been meeting since 2018, and that conference is in October in Providence. You can attend virtually. Most often they do allow you to attend virtually, and they have the presentations available. So that's one way of participating. You can sign up for the newsletter on the Ropeless Consortium website. You can ask at a restaurant when you're out for ropeless seafood. Do you have ropeless? Do you have whale safe, seafood or whatever it is? And you know what? They're probably going to say, I don't know, or no, but it's a chance to educate that waiter or waitress, and then they may go, if they hear it enough, they may go tell the chef, the owner. I mean, I think this is a way that we raise the vibration on this. Of course, the Seafood Watch is the one that's done right, Monterey Bay. That's a great one to follow, but there's no reason you can't, anywhere you are, ask them about this and try to engage them. And then, of course, writing your representative, writing an op-ed, any kind of thing like that you could do to help say that this is important to you. This was an event that happened that was put on by the International Fund for Animal Welfare in Boston last year. And at the event, they served ropelessly caught whale-safe lobster for everyone. This is a picture of that. And there's a lot of opportunity here for this to become part of the future. There's so many exciting things going on. We didn't get to talk about everything, but we tried to give you a little bit of an insight into what's going on here. And I just love this picture because it just shows like what the future could hold, where we could have an opportunity to save whales and save the fishermen. Thank you. Here's our acknowledgement side. We'll open it up to questions.
Absolutely wonderful and hopeful, and I can't say enough to you and how just incredible work you're doing, and the stick-to-itiveness doing this work. I just feel like we all need to support people who are doing this type of work and putting their brains together and doing this, incredibly important work. I'm kind of tongue-tied right now, but I'm super impressive to have heard you a few years back and to hear you now. I feel that forward momentum is achieved there. It just feels way more comfortable to imagine ropeless crab cakes at our next Crab and Wine Fest. Bring it into the conversation so much closer. So gosh, thank you. And questions, folks, since we're such a small group, if you have a question that you'd like to ask out loud, I can make that happen. Michael Hicks is just saying in the chat, thank you for the presentation and the important work you're doing. I hope you feel supported by our small community and beyond. Anybody want to just chime in? We're a pretty small group. Feel free. It's an opportunity to ask some questions.
Yeah, Sarah, I'd like to thank Rich and Zach so much for bringing their presentation out. Richard, it's awfully good to see you again. It's been a few years.
How are you?
I'm doing well, and thank you very much. I know how busy you are, especially going back and forth across the country and wherever else. And Zach, I know exactly how busy you are. So thank you very much for coming out, and thank you, Wendy, for putting this together. We talked about it quite a while ago, and so just thanks. This is really important in this area. Fort Bragg and the Gualala area have a lot of commercial activity, and I know there's a lot of enthusiasm about this program and a lot of confusion about it too. So this helps a lot. Again, thanks. And thanks, Richard, for putting this together with Zach. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a question for Rich. What kind of work have you done in California around ropeless, and where do you think, things are kind of at right now? For California, and the West Coast.
So we have some exciting things happening out west. We just the World Fisheries Congress was in Seattle 3 weeks ago, and it was really nice to for one, drive down I-5 and go to a conference very close to my home, which has been probably 20 years that I've been able to do that. And it was really neat to have a lot of my colleagues and the people we've been working with. But what was really amazing was the real vibe and the real increase in interest on the West Coast. I've been working on the West Coast. I was part of a whale entanglement group, and we tried to do everything we could to get some traction, and it was a real challenge. And we had some great fishers and really old school captains that were really had a lot of knowledge, and we did some neat things. I demonstrated how the lift bag system could really work really well in mud areas where the traps mire in, especially Dungeness, and they fish out of the mouth of the Columbia, so this very silty. And we did a demonstration where I set the gear where the lift bag was underneath the crab trap, and it actually broke it out of the mud and flipped the trap over, and it came up. And when I learned that the fishers out west spend countless hours trying to recover their stuck gear, they instantly were like, they had no idea that this lift bag technology could actually like pop it out of the mud. And so there was all of a sudden some interest from these fishers, and I'm not going to say they wanted to kick me out of the room, but in the very beginning they kind of did. And then they finally were really engaging, and they were talking, and they were asking, and I was able to get on some boats. And then we had a real great test with the Quinault, the Lummi Indian tribes, the Swinomish, the Tulalip, and we long lined Dungeness crab. So we had 5 to 10 traps set, and then we had the on demand of the ropeless unit on one end, and they loved it. They've had a lot of negative interaction with other fishers, basically cutting their lines. So they were very pleased to feel that we could basically build them gear that they could kind of hide. So it was we got different responses from different groups of fishers that we work with. And then the Canadian Wildlife Federation, we've been working very closely with. We've been helping them build their gear cache in Nova Scotia, in Halifax, and they reached out to me and they asked us to build some custom new units, which we just are finishing now, to start a gear library in British Columbia. So this idea of moving these gear libraries, which I'll give a little update on that, and what we've decided, I think, from society and from the government's perspective and state fisheries, is if we can get some of this gear together in these libraries and have trained help and people that can work with the gear, we hand it over to the fishermen at no cost. And ultimately, if they really get into the program, they actually can make a stipend and get rewarded for trialing, testing, collecting the data, and then responding back with suggestions for us to make the gear better. So it's been really neat to see these gear libraries growing, and that's what I hope to see happen to California. We start taking some of the models that have happened in the Maritime Province and in the Gulf of Maine, and say, look, we got to build some gear libraries and get some of these captains out there with the gear and the proper training and the understanding of how to use the gear. Because most of what I've learned working with the fishers is just they don't know what we're talking about, so it's terrifying. They can't imagine how you can go fishing with no vertical line. It doesn't make sense to them, and I can completely understand their perspective. But the first time they see that lift bag reach the surface, I've seen some really grumpy old men smile and smirk, and it's been pretty awesome and very rewarding, because, but again, it shows that, you know, it's the humanity of all of us. They didn't know something, and that's why we say education and learning, because I learn every day, but I try to educate as well, and that's a big part of what we try to do. And I think the West Coast is going to start really picking up here. There's a ton of entanglements that are not going to be able to be swept under the rug for much longer, and the closures are coming, and that is just so hard on the fishers. If they're going to be closed, then we got to give them a tool that allows them to keep, you know, supporting their fishery and their families, and ultimately society. You know, seafood is very important on festivals and holidays and traditions and things that make people feel good. And a lot of people enjoy eating this food, and so we want to do it in a way that protects whales. Whales are probably one of the most important species on the planet. That we didn't really get into much of what they do biologically and for the ecosystem, but they are the whale pump. They are the fertilizers and they are the farmers of the ocean. And they can sequester more carbon than any other known species on the planet when they pass and bring that to the sea floor. We built the Industrial Revolution off the backs of whales, and we believe that it's time to repay whales. And I would like to see whale populations actually increase and move into the future where we're starting to stop talking about losing all these whales and start talking about where these whales are returning and new places that whale watch can be there and safer fishing areas. But it's a very hard, challenging problem, and it has to be bought in by all of society. And that's what SMELTS has really tried hard to do. Is it has to work for all of us, including the fishermen, the government, the state government, the seafood purchaser, the wholesalers, the disentanglement teams, everybody that's involved with this. And I feel very honored and humbled every day to wake up every day and try to save a whale and try to save a fisherman.
Beautifully said, Rich. Wow. I just want to like have that echoed again and again. It gives a bit of hope, which is scarce in a lot of our, just the talks about everything. It's just really enlightening to have you speak so eloquently, both of you, to the problem. And then there's a little seed of hope that I want to leave with. And I will get to the questions in the chat because there are a couple, which is great. But yeah, Scott mentioned confusion. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at there's these ideas and concepts that are being put out there, and they're like our local harbor. I feel like they're pressed to the wall with frustration in what's happening with rules and regulations and government and all of that. But here we have this little field station that kind of was a cafe, but it's an old Italian restaurant right in the heart of the harbor. And I feel like, what could we put out with education, and how could we approach our community that we are, being really actually welcomed into by, there's not a lot of boats there. There used to be, but we're in this community. We have this opportunity to have these conversations, and even just having some literature or an educational panel or here's what you can do kind of thing is an exciting idea that I'm getting right now. So maybe you can, before I get to the couple questions in the chat, I'm just curious, what can we do to address the confusion?
It's education. It's talking about the problem and the potential solutions and really working together. Without our captains, we wouldn't be where we are. I could never simulate the way that they're testing the gear. I have two fishermen. They're fishing at over 200 fathoms. That's 1,200 feet deep, and out off the Georges Bank in some of the most challenging conditions. But where right whales live and where they get wrapped up in heavy industrial type fishing gear. And so it's these partnerships of gaining trust, and it's baby steps. Most of my captains, it's taken 2 years of nurturing, love, buying you beer. Can I buy you some dinner? Can I get you some technology that I can write a grant? Would you let me put that on your boat? And SMELTS, we won the National Fish and Wildlife Fund grant, and I put in there $100,000 to work with the fishermen, and it was the hardest fight that I had through the whole grant, and I wasn't gonna bend. They're like, well, what do you need this money for? And I'm like, if I'm working on a captain's boat and we're at sea and we need something, I need to be able to take care of that and help him. That shows the commitments and that we can get to the end of this. And then when they see that, they gain trust. And then at the end of the day, I mean, I've gained a whole bunch of fishermen friends that I never expected was going to ever happen to me. So, being the guy that, will jump on a whale, will do anything to save a whale. But when I started getting close to the fishermen, the fisheries, and we have fisher ladies too. And I started to really gain this huge affection for them,
Mm.
and understand much better how we need to approach this. So, and listen to them and understand better about what they've been already trying to do, and you know that they have tried a lot of things and they really weren't rewarded for it. So I think Noah has finally got this understanding, and they're really now realizing that they have to buck up. This is a societal problem, and we need to have grants and good funding sources for people to have the opportunity to build the gear, work with the fishers, talk to the wholesale buyers and say, look, if we could get you enough whale safe gear, would you purchase this? And these are the conversations we're having now. Like, you know, what do we got to do to actually bring whale safe gear to the market? How do we market this? And some of the early captains we're working with, they're coming in right now. They're getting $15 a pound for lobster. So they're the only ones bringing in lobster because they're able to be out in these closures. And boy, they're like, I don't even have to fish that much. And winter fishing is very hard. So they're all of a sudden seeing these potential, you know, valuable things that they can do. And one other big thing for them that they struggle with is when you have a fishery that closes, they have to remove all the gear out of the ocean. It's not allowed to be there. So one of the things I've been telling the feds and the fishers is, look at, if you at least could remove your vertical lines and put those on-demand or ropeless units on the sea floor, you guys are going to have to move your gear a lot less, and we're going to burn a lot less fuel. There's a lot less chance of ship strike, you running whales over trying to go out and get your gear, move it. And it took me years to get some of the upper management of these organizations to understand what I was saying. And now they're realizing, I'm like, look at, even just putting ropeless units down so we can go back and recover the gear properly and get it back, and not have to have the fishers move and have these big operations of bringing gear in and offshore. And just that alone, I mean, they're starting to understand this is a real value.
Beautiful. So good. Let's see. I have a question. Let's see. Misha is asking, can you explain how the technology attached to the bottom of the hull works? You had mentioned it helps fishermen maintain efficiency, but I think I missed what its functionality is. Thank you,
Yeah,
Misha.
so to understand exactly what we're doing here, and what I call is, we're using dolphin calls. We're literally having two speakers that are communicating. That's the only thing that really works in the ocean, is sound. So we're sending these little packets of information, these little sound packs from the vessel speaker, which you saw in that slide, down to the lobster or crab raft. And it, on that unit, it's an acoustic package that has a speaker as well. And those two speakers are communicating back and forth. And that is how we actually tell that thing to come up, or how deep are you, or what temperature is down there. We've built these units to be very data rich, so we can ask it questions. We're getting ready to build a unit this year that can send video and pictures back from the sea, and this is with sound. So it's a neat emerging technology. It's I hate to use the cell phone analogy, but it wasn't very long before we went from, you know, rotary phones to in-house. You know, just think about being able to pick up a phone in your house that wasn't connected to a cord. Like, that was a huge thing. And then all of a sudden we get into these flip phones and early smartphones, Blackberries, and that it's really similar to that. We're basically using that very similar type of platform, a cell phone platform, a modem. Instead of it being a radio modem, it's an acoustic modem. And those speakers are talking back and forth, and they're really outside the audible range of really all the rorquals and all the big cetaceans. Now, the dolphins can definitely hear it, but it is a very, let me put it this way. The way I describe it to people, because people that are real experts in the marine mammals, they're like, well, is this going to harm the animal? And I was like, well, when your neighbor starts the lawnmower next door, it's annoying, and maybe you go inside and make some tea, but it didn't hurt you. And we, and that's probably the most we'd ever get out of it if there was a big fishery and you had 100 boats pinging at the exact same time, which probably just never going to really happen too much. You might make them turn, but really the boat engines, and like we've done a bunch of hydrophone studies, and the engines and the gear shifts, and they are so much noisier than anything. Because I had this question 5 years ago, and we took out some experts, and I have hydrophone systems, and they couldn't even believe what they were actually hearing. I'm like, you can't even hear the acoustics. You're hearing ships coming by, you're hearing the ferry boats, you're hearing the big ships moving. And so it was all that. And then they were really, I think they were brought to light that, oh, wow, the ocean is really noisy. I'm like, yeah, the stuff that we're doing is actually really quiet compared to that. Because it's a millisecond. It's incredibly fast. Like most people might not even catch it. And you got to really listen. So it was neat that I found a technology that we could incorporate into the ocean that wasn't going to sonify the ocean. Like that was an important thing for me. I didn't want to like, instantly put a bunch of sound out there to, make a new problem to solve a problem. That's not what we wanted.
Right. Dobby, did you have something to say there?
Yeah, I do. I had just written an article for our Noyo Center newsletter last month, 2 months ago, about ropeless fishing gear. So I did a lot of research. So it's really exciting to have you come. I'm sorry I came late. And
Awesome.
and see some of these videos and everything. It's really great. It's very exciting. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been an unbelievable road. I mean, for 5 years when I was testing and working on, I mean, I couldn't get anybody even to listen to me. Like, you're crazy. You're talking about, some real powerful groups that, and in the very beginning for 2 years, we would sneak the gear down in like the middle of the night with under blankets and quilts, and, or I'd have to go bring it to the captain's truck and hide it in the back of his truck in the middle of the night. I mean, it was some really interesting stuff in the beginning, and to now have these captains wearing our SMELTS hat in these big fisheries meetings and talking to federal and state officials and saying, give me the gear, I can go fishing. It's been a real honor, really, for these men and women that really we're trying to build them something for a part of their life that most of us have a struggle to understand really what that is. And the listening that I've done with these folks, it has educated me and taught me so much. And I hope in the end we build them something that they admire and they take ownership in, and they take pride in it, no different than their boat. Like, look, this is an important piece of equipment for you. Please take care of it. These are the simple things we have learned that you do to take care of the gear. And I think if we can get some of that movement still continue to move, and they can get some real traceable whale safe prices for their catch, that will inspire them to do this.
Great. Wonderful. Well, any way that we can support you and spread the word, we will kind of push this talk a bit. I think we had a small audience tonight, and I can think of so many people that I really wish were here listening to you both. And there are some people doing some great stuff in the Noyo Harbor. So, we could be a little tiny example to our neighbors, maybe just tiny step by tiny step. With that, I may need to let you go, but can't thank you enough, folks. Please support the kind of work that these guys are doing in any way that you can. Spread the word. Dobby, thank you for your article, and the Noyo Center, Wendy, and we put the Pinniped Press out, which is a pretty lovely newsletter that our volunteers write and publish. And great article, Dobby, and for getting people aware and alert, and to Scott and Tree for being down there, and to all of you who are out there looking at the ocean. We're all in this together. So, and it's a real honor to have you speak to us tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll come
Yes.
down and see you.
Thank you.
I'll
Please,
come down. We'll bring some
anytime.
gear down and we can plan a fun day of talking about on-demand gear and saving whales and saving fishermen.
Absolutely. We would love that. Absolutely. Anytime. We would really love and honored to be host to you. So please do. Anytime. Come on down.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Bring some samples of these traps. I'd really like to see one in real life.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I'll do. I'll bring them down and we can get some people and we can do some tests and yeah, talk about it.
Great. Great stuff. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks again.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Scott, for
Zach.
recommending them.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott.